All right, let's bring the meeting to order here. Joe may be joining us here in about an hour, so, or somewhere around there. So we'll see, kind of where we're at. Because we have a lot to cover here today. So, and I like this maybe a little bit better because we'll do it quarterly. So we have more items to discuss, I guess. So, okay, let's call the meeting to order and approve the minutes from the May 2nd meeting. Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Yep, I'll second that.
Do we need to do a roll call, by the way? It's Scott, I, and Joe. I mean, but Joe's not here, so, okay. Okay, perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's talk about the structure of the RDC note of the $6 million owed to the city for recommendation to city council. I know Joe's here, or Jeremy, or whoever. So where we stand on this?
So this is Jeremy, for the record, Jeremy Lawler with the city. I met with, I shouldn't say Matt and I met with Cindy, Councilor Spoljaric, probably a month ago now, to discuss the strategy and the amendment of the resolution that originally loaned the money from the city to the RDC. We took away from that meeting that Ann Poindexter was going to work on drafting the resolution, defining what those terms that you all are requesting are, and I haven't seen that since. That's about all I know of it.
Okay. So, and Jeremy, excuse me, we'll just hit it right off, right?
Yep.
Why is this so doggone hard to figure out how to pay $6 million back to the city?
I don't know that it's hard. Once we understand what the terms are, we can work on how to fund it.
Yeah.
We being the RDC and Grand Park to get that established.
Were those terms discussed and ironed out in the meeting?
Essentially, the request was $500,000 a year until it's paid in full. We expressed our concerns about how that would impact the capital planning for Grand Park, with it being $500,000, taking $500,000 of we'll call it profit in this case, right off the top. I think that we can talk about other TIF ways, whether some cash flows back from TIF, but we have to really do the analysis on that once we get the resolution done. To your point, I think the resolution's a really easy document. I don't know what is taking so long, but then it requires council action to adopt the resolution. So
Sure. So you just now expressed some concern about the 500,000, a year. What is a more reasonable dollar figure in your estimation?
Quite honestly, I think it puts us in a much better position if we have a kind of a prorated amount. So if we say we call it $200,000 minimum, and then if revenue or profits hit a certain mark, we'll take a percentage of that and flow it back, something like that, just so, because as you know, we've got a couple turf fields that will start getting replaced this year, and then for the next 3 or 4 years, there's capital outlay, and Matt has a really great capital plan. I think once you all make your decision of how that gets structured and how it gets paid back, then we can update our plan and see what those impacts are.
Okay, we have a turf fund though, right?
Baseball has a turf fund. The
Okay.
field sports side has our cash reserve as the turf fund.
What is our cash position currently?
You know that off the top of your head, Matt? Currently $6.5 million.
Okay. And what, through the other TIF funds, what's our cash position?
I think John will talk about that in the upcoming specific Grand Junction TIF.
Is it over 12 million?
In total for the TIFs, yes. Grand Junction TIF specifically be in the neighborhood of $6 million at But the ending balance of 22 will be 5.13 based on our projections. And then John has a really nice spreadsheet here that describes as physical Grand Junction debt starts coming on, how that forecasts out from a cash perspective out to 2030, I think is what he's got it.
Thanks, John. So,
Hey, John, could you give me a copy of that so I can attach it to the minutes? Thank you.
I will make note, though, for the record and for everyone, that this is a very fluid document. It changes all the time.
sure.
I know it was updated this morning, and by the end of the day, it may be a little outdated. So as revenue projections and things come back in from the state as a part of our budgeting process, this will continue to get updated. So I guess for the point of conversation, the city and the RDC, I will speak for them. Everybody's on board with updating the resolution and finding a structure to pay this back. I just hope that we can do it in a mindful manner so that way we don't handcuff ourselves out there should we have a rough year, bad weather year, tournaments canceling, things like that, that doesn't impede our long-term capital plan.
Yeah. And Jeremy, I know, I mean, this is not, this is not necessarily you, I mean, but, I mean, Cindy's been talking about this since the day, or the month that we started on city council 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just, I know common sense is somewhat of an oxymoron sometimes when we talk about it, but it's like, here's $6 million that's owed. We're screaming to the hills that we're profitable at Grand Park, even though we're not. But we can't pay back the $6 million, but yet we continue to flush cash into our system, and it goes to every other project imaginable except to pay back the taxpayers their dollars. And the only reason I bring this up, and I'm just going to rant just for a second, and as I sometimes often do, and sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. We create an RDC to circumvent the very city council that's overseeing the finance side. We lend the $6 million. I know this is before your time. We lend the $6 million, so we have no say in what's going on to get the $6 million back. For God's sakes, just pay the $6 million back. I mean, if it's $1 million a year or $500,000 a year or $100,000 a year, pay the money back. It's just, I mean, the taxpayers deserve the opportunity to receive the money back what they paid. I mean, that's just not, it's unimaginable that we have to have two attorneys involved. We're talking about it. We need to have a meeting to then have a meeting to discuss what we're going to meet about to pay back the $6 million. I've never seen so much dysfunction in my entire life. I mean, my God. I mean, welcome to government, I guess. And I'm just, again, it's not all pointed at you, Jeremy. I'm just saying, but even though you happen to be standing there and,
And I'll restate what I stated before. When the resolution's ready and you guys have the terms lined out, we're not afraid to pay the money back. It is worth note that the RDC dollars are tax dollars as well, so you're using tax dollars to pay back tax dollars. But we are on board for it. We just have to finalize it so we can get it in the 23 budget and start marching forward.
I just wanted to, and it was before your time too, but when that money was loaned to Grand Park, when RDC or whoever it was that did this, there's things if they don't want made public, I'm never included on it, and I don't ever remember $500,000 a year was what was supposed to be paid back.
No, he's not saying that. He's just saying,
I'm not, yeah, that's,
that's not
Oh,
what
I
he's
there
saying.
were,
thought
there
you
was no
said that-
repayment terms
That's
in
what I
the
thought. I don't
council
remember
resolution that was originally
anything
approved.
about
Yeah.
repayment.
That's what this discussion is how do we amend the resolution to document the repayment terms?
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought $500,000 was supposed to have
Nope.
already been coming.
No.
Yeah, so ultimately, we've got to figure out how quickly we want to pull that Band-Aid off.
Mhm.
And we need to figure out how we make sure that this does not happen again. I mean, a $6 million loan with no terms of repayment that's sat out there for how many years just seems beyond something that would be possible, I guess. So I think there's, 2 points there that we need to make sure we take into account. Not only, we're pulling the Band-Aid off, let's figure out how quickly we're going to do it, and then how do we make sure we don't get in a spot like this again?
We could write a resolution, honestly, in the next 5 minutes, put it together to have people vote on it. Honest to God. I mean, it would be that freaking simple. I mean, I don't know,
I'll reach out, I'll talk to Ann and make sure
Jiminy
maybe that's
Christmas.
part of the language as well, if possible.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, I'll stop.
Thank you for the update.
Sure,
And
yeah.
and again, as Troy pointed out, recognize this was not your doing. So you're sitting there taking the
Yep.
heat for something that wasn't your doing, but
I certainly can't take credit for the actions of previous council members, so.
Yeah, yep, okay,
understand.
okay. Let's move on here. Okay, let's talk about budgets versus actual. I know. So,
Okay, I'll start off by, first I'll apologize for getting this to you so late. You may not even have seen it yet. Quite honestly, I just didn't get it done. And so just like the last quarter, you have the budget versus actual and comments from the managing directors. I will acknowledge the admin budget is tracking over for a couple reasons, which I noted. Same as in the first quarter. The salary structure, my salary structure in particular, is different than what previous chief of staff was. So as that is, the salary line is underfunded, so there'll be an additional appropriation that comes for that. And then likewise, the perf benefits are different for a civilian employee as compared to others. We will, as we've discussed, I don't know if I've done it publicly, but at least with the two of you, I believe, we're gonna do an additional appropriation for legal fees to not only cover what our projected expenses are, but also try to break those into the associated departments so we can really identify where those legal dollars are going. I know we all think it's lawsuits. The reality is the vast majority of that is not associated with lawsuits. There are a couple, but as we all know, we get sued all the time. Tort claims, other things. We have to be able to defend ourselves. And a lot of this is going toward land acquisition for projects, development agreements, and all of those things. So I'm working right now to get a complete breakdown per cause number, or per issue, so that we can put those in the appropriate buckets. So RDC generates a fair amount of legal fees. Plan Commission generates a fair amount of legal fees outside of retainer. So just working on getting that done. We get the appropriations done. We can do some adjustments in the admin budget as well as in the what will be the new general fund expenses in the other departments. So more to come on that. I will scroll down to where we are currently from a general fund perspective as we're tracking. I did this manually yesterday and today. Part of the struggle was, and I know it's completely above board and a function of what Cindy does in her office, but there was a $64 million transfer, which was throwing everything off. So I went through and I deleted that and then essentially created this where we are today, which is highlighted on the screen. So through the first half of 22, our half budget is roughly 4.8 million, with encumbrances, so approved POs, so money not spent but encumbered, and actual expenses. We are at 11.8 million, which is 2 million under budget, or roughly 13.5% under budget, tracking for the first half, specific to the general fund. Department heads made comments along the way here. If there are any questions with that, I'm happy to have them come up and explain some of their comments. Mostly what we're seeing in overage is fuel costs, like equipment and vehicle repair costs, and then some of our raw materials, whether it be cleaning products or aggregate, in this case here, stone, and other things that have just increased over the last year, since the budget was approved. So I do foresee a couple of other additional appropriations toward the end of the year once we really know what we're dealing with. But I know that everybody that's managing these budgets is going to do their best to try to manage within the approved budget. It's just hard to forecast at this point.
Okay, you said we're running about 13% under budget though, right?
Correct.
Okay. This is just a question, it's a real question. When we have certain areas that we know are going to be over budget or whatever the appropriations may need to be. One of the things that I said before, when Todd was here, I said, having a working budget is a function of every good business that's out there. And a working budget means updating that budget throughout the year.
Sure.
So whether it be the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, me personally, I would like to ask for the appropriations as we go, and then change if it means, and I know we don't submit it to the DLGF, I know that, but internally understand what that budget is going to be. And if we say, hey, we thought it was going to be 40, it's actually going to be 80 because of this, you ask for the appropriation, we change it at least within our system in an Excel spreadsheet that never goes to the DLGF. We have that way we have a working budget, so we have an understanding of what those things are going to be. And I'm just talking out loud.
I think I'll defer that to Cindy and what that would entail. I know all this information gets pulled directly out of NAV, which, to my understanding, can't change after the budget is approved.
Yeah, but we can change an Excel spreadsheet.
But we can modify the sheets,
And that way,
Sure.
at least it's on record of saying, again, I'm just trying to think of best practices in business. And I know I'll catch grief for saying we're a business, but having a working budget is probably no different than Scott or I in our businesses. We constantly have budgets, they change, we update them,
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I do view this as a business, and I hope everyone else does too. We just have a little different playbook when it comes to
Right.
the government finance aspect.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the Excel spreadsheet.
So for our purposes, I'm sure we could work with Cindy's office and get something out of that, I would assume, with the appropriate input.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not that it's terribly expensive, but it does cost money and energy and time to do an additional appropriation, which is why we've typically done it at the end when we really know, because everybody will target trying to get everything in that budget, even if it means they're spending less in an equipment line or some other line to offset the cost of fuel or whatever it might be. Everybody works to do that to avoid the additional appropriation at the end, but we're open to however you want to do it.
That's exactly why I would like to do it as we go.
Sure.
Kind of for that same, just kind of on the other side of that is to say that everybody is going to work, whether it be even in the second quarter, to ensure that their budgets are still under budget. And I'm probably not saying this right. I'm just trying to think in my head how that, whatever. I know what I'm thinking, but I'm not really saying it.
I think it would be appropriate to have the expectation listed. I think we need to study whether or not it makes sense to actually get that, do the appropriation as the need warrants, and maybe we do wait till the end of the year, but we at least have that understanding of, hey, we're going to need potentially, if we keep at this pace, we're gonna need however many hundreds of thousands of extra dollars. And try to chip away at that as much as we can to the point that you're making.
Sure.
As we go and try to get that back down to a zero by the end of the year. That's my thinking, but we can dive a little deeper into that offline.
Yeah, no problem. And as you hopefully meet with the different department heads, candidly, the big three are where you're going to see most of this change in police, fire, and public works. I know they all have a plan. I know they're watching it every day, and I'm certain they're happy to explain to you what their plans are. So,
Excellent.
Mr. Edwards.
so as you review that document, if you have questions then, let us know. If you have questions now, let us know. Either way, we'll try to get you some answers, and we'll keep working on this process to make it better. I will do my best to do a better job and make time for it earlier, so that way we can get this out to you about a week or so before the meeting.
Appreciate that, and appreciate the fact that we've got it again to look at and to study.
Yep.
So I do appreciate that very much. Again, another great step in the right direction.
And so I had, if we're done with that, I had a couple other budget questions while we're here, and they should be quick and easy. It was brought to my attention that you all had requested, you all being the council, I don't know specifically who, that utility bills be individualized per department. So as it is now, like the planning department or community development doesn't contribute to a water, power, or gas bill. It's all wrapped up into the general fund. I think we have the ability to break that down per square feet and budget it that way. Are you wanting that for the 23 budget, or is what we currently have, which is largely Public Works paying for parks and city services, and then police and fire paying for their portions of their own buildings? Is that acceptable, or do we need to go into HR and community development and guest services and divide those utility bills by whatever space they're consuming?
I personally don't think that's necessary, but that's.
I would say, sorry for jumping in there. We have the resources to do that, right? Let me ask you this: how much additional effort is that going to take?
It's fairly significant. For us, it's fairly significant up front. I think more for the clerk's treasurer's office and in the back end is where because they're going to have to go in and do calculations every single month and divide out which line gets paid.
My perspective on that is, I don't see that it would be necessary, but I wasn't the one that made the request, so that might be a good thing for us to kind of check with the rest of the council and figure out what
that's
the
fine.
thought behind that was.
Okay.
And see
I
if
wanted
that
to put
makes
it out to this group because we've got to get to these things finalized, and if we have a project like that, we need to get that rolling.
Yeah, sometimes with things like that, Jeremy, I mean, I would, I don't really want to put that onus back on you guys. I mean, if we want that done, I would think that'd be a function of our financial side or the clerk treasurer's office to go out and say, hey, if we want to delineate between costs of certain departments on things like that, then they should actually go out and measure that square footage and then do that themselves. I mean, that's the way I see it. I see you guys doing more of the operational aspect of it, and then the clerk treasurer side doing more of the financial side or delineating between those expenses. And I could be wrong on that, but that's just my kind of thought process there.
No, and it makes sense in a more real business world atmosphere where you're generating revenues out of different departments. That makes a ton of sense. But in this case, we would be dividing it. It would all be coming from the general fund, the 101 fund anyway. So I just don't know if there's a ton of value for the return on the investment wouldn't be great.
I think the ones that Mike had talked about was like cell phones, uniforms, and that sort of thing.
And
To split.
to my knowledge, everybody has their own lines for those
Not
things.
cell
Well, cell phones is all ran through IT,
Yeah.
with exception of fire, right, or police?
Police and fire.
With
Yeah.
exception of the public safety, that comes out of public safety lit from the county, but everybody else has, so everybody else is bulked up into one
Right,
line that comes out of Chris's
right.
budget.
And that's the one, I think, the cell phone and the uniforms, not for public safety, but for public works.
I
As
do
the
know
ones
that Public Works has its own uniform budget, and I assume that the rest of the groups, which is
Yeah.
mostly,
Those are the ones that he
Logoed
wanted-
apparel
was
that-
talking about splitting, cell phones and that sort of thing. We'll talk later.
I would say at this point, let's hold tight with the way we're doing it. and
Okay.
Not worry about anything until we get back to you.
good, I appreciate that.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay,
I
so,
apologize for not having better direction or
No,
better
it's
insight
fine.
on that right now.
so one thing on the budget that I have, this has kind of been weighing on my mind, and this is probably more of an emotional response to this, is actually what's happened up in Elwood, Indiana, with the police officer. And I know Joel's here, and, you know, I mean, Elwood's a small community, right? I mean, so, you know, you don't, I mean, there should be no cost on life, right? So, I mean, that's just, I've really been thinking about this ever since that happened, because I thought, my God, that kid is such a young kid, and it's terrible, right? So I'm like, what is it that we could do? And I'm not saying that things like that, I mean, you can't expect crazy to be rational. But what is it that we can do, have, or implement to try to reduce that from happening, the odds of that happening here?
Yeah, and I think that's a better question for Joel. I do know that they do everything they can to protect our people. Are there any specific things that you think? So we'll let Joel talk about that a little bit.
And I mean, I'm saying it from the standpoint, and I truly mean this, and because, you know, if cost was no object, what would we do to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, it's heavy on our hearts right now, right? For me, I think about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not just when something happens, but I think about it, you know, when I go to bed at night, we've got 10 officers out there on the road, and I think about it. That's why my hair's turning white. But in all seriousness, we train for it to the best that you can. Unfortunately, there's always going to be someone out there that, if they want you bad enough, unfortunately, they can get you. There's no way to prepare for that. You know, we have the tools to do the job. That's one thing in the past 12 years. The mayor, all the different councils that we had, the councilors that we've had, the community itself, we have a unique city here where we have, even when the nation was, you know, going a different direction with the police, and quite frankly, the environment was horrible to be a police officer, we got support here. And we feel that. We have great benefits. We're able to recruit really good people. We're not perfect by any means, but our people are good. And we train them well. And I think that's what it comes down to, is finding the right people, training them to the best of your ability, and being there for each other, caring for them, having a good wellness program, and we're doing all that. So as far as what we could do different,
Yeah.
there's no money cost to it other than what we're doing already.
Yeah. I mean, because I think of like, you know, what we do, and man, I honestly, I've been thinking about this, and it's like the one thing that keeps me up at night, and I'm like, man, you know, honestly, God, I woke up the other night at like 1:30 in the morning. I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, what is it that we could do to make sure that that never happens in Westfield? And this is not a sci-fi film, right? But I started thinking, I'm like, what, you know, have drones, I mean, fly around the car before they get out even and look at, I mean, I started thinking of them like, what is the, I know this sounds crazy, right? So, but I literally woke up the other night thinking about this, and I'm like, what is the cost? I mean, what could we do that we are not doing? At what cost, I mean, to prevent that from happening? You know, I mean, a young kid, you know, like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's much appreciated that you're thinking like that, but you guys do it already. You're giving us the support we need. We have the best of equipment.
yeah,
We have great benefits, and today, we have the staffing that we need to do the job.
yeah.
And you have to rely on us to make sure that we're training our people,
Yeah.
and that's what,
No,
and we're doing that.
I mean, look, I know you're doing everything. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to.
It's sad that there's people out there that take advantage of, or I don't even know how to put it in words.
Yeah.
But
I mean, and
it's sad. There's people that are not wired right,
yeah,
and you know, I mean, you can train, and that young man probably he just came out of the academy 11 months ago.
yeah,
So he's had training, but man, we're living in times where if someone wants you, whether they want to use a vehicle or use whatever resource they have, you know,
I mean,
we can be kind of defenseless.
yeah, and
some of
please,
it.
please don't mistake this as a political statement.
No.
But I really thought, like, I was thinking about the $6 million, and I thought, why can we not get $6 million? I mean, if that would save a life, that's what we would do.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I mean, that's, and again, that's not a political statement. I was just thinking about it. So I've been thinking about it a lot over the last few days, so.
Yeah.
We appreciate what you do,
Thank you.
and
Absolutely.
I think I think it goes without saying, if there's something that you need, let us know without hesitation.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay,
All right. So in light of that, I have one more question.
okay.
Historically, we've had for budget purposes specifically, we've had a special council meeting. Generally, it was during the day, public notice, full meeting, to do budget presentations so we don't consume a 4-hour evening. Is that the route you all want to take again this year?
I'm okay with it.
I would say yes.
Okay. So with that, I'll send out some potential dates for Garitas, that Greg is available, so we can try to get that on the books. We need to get done really toward the end of August here. So hopefully we can get it out far enough that everybody can calendar out a few hours in their day to get that done. So just wanted to make sure we're on the same point there.
Okay.
Other than that,
You have any questions? You have any questions, Joe? Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next thing here.
Looks like that one's me as well.
Okay,
So we've had lots of conversations about this agreement with the DWA, and then subsequently the lease or property management agreement that comes along with that. Had a meeting with Cindy, and actually Marla was there as well on the same day that we met about the last topic, whatever that was, the $6 million. So we put together a new agreement. We distributed it to her at that point in time of what we were proposing, and again, we're open to however you all want to do it. I haven't gotten any comments back on that. Would it be appropriate to distribute that draft to you all as well? We were just working with Cindy because she's been the one, she was around then, and she's been the one that's really been driving it, so.
yeah, that's fine. What about the closing statements on these properties?
From when we purchased them,
Yeah,
I will see if we can get those.
that's one of the things I put on here. I mean, I wanted to see the closing statements. I wanted to see whose name they were closed in. I just wanted to follow the paper trail of where everything was at.
Yeah, we can try to get that. I mean, there's really just, as of now, unless we have a different discussion down here about the Grand Junction RFP, it's just the 2 buildings. So the neighboring house, which we've owned for many, many years.
Yep.
And likewise, the old laundromat, or where the distillery is today.
Yeah,
I know we owned that well before I was here, and that was
Who
2005.
owns it? The
City
city?
of Westfield owns both of those.
Okay.
Let me double check on that one. City of Westfield definitely owns that one. Pretty sure they own that one. Here, maybe I can pull it up.
Yeah, and, you know, this is just another thing, and I mean, it just irritates me probably more than anything, is how does this possibly happen that, you know, that we just assign these leases to the Downtown Westville Association, they receive the money, and it never goes back to the city? I mean, the correct methodology here is the leases would be paid if we wanted to pay DWA a management fee or something, but the money should be coming to the city, not the DWA. I mean,
You won't hear argument from me on that. I believe the intention, when it was all in place, was to help fund the DWA, and this has been many years ago.
they have over $100,000 of cash on their books. I mean, this is getting to
The
be
structure of
absurd.
the DWA has changed completely. They have board members now that do really nice job fundraising. I've talked to Steve several times about it. He's open to that conversation too. From my perspective, from a property management perspective, there's not enough return on that investment for me to hire somebody to manage those properties. Quite honestly, it would be cheaper for the city to tear them down than it would be to lease them and try to manage them and try to capture revenue, because there's just, like, they're very unique. We've got a really good tenant in Camilla Court right now. It hasn't always been that way. I hope it stays that way for a while. This one over here is a 100-and-some-year-old house, and it's not conducive to business, very many businesses, I should say. That one was only transferred to the DWA when Heart and Soul Clinic moved out and found their own location. So they haven't been managing that one for a long time. It's only been a few years. But we did have other properties that are now gone that they managed or internal to Grand Junction. So all those properties are obviously have been torn down, and they don't do that anymore. So it's really isolated to those two. There is an opportunity that we'll discuss later to lease the cafe at Grand Junction to them so that they can more easily find a tenant as compared to our RFP process, which is governed by statute. Obviously, I can't just go out and pick somebody to lease it. I don't get that luxury. So we'll talk about that when that
Does it
comes
seem
up.
odd though, Jeremy, honestly? I mean, that, that we, and I know this is gonna probably sound rude, as I often get accused of, but for God's sakes, I mean, why do we have to have a discussion about it? End it. I mean, we're letting someone else collect money, I mean, on behalf of the city that they're keeping? I mean, why do we even have to have a discussion about it? That ends today, it's over, the money comes to the city. I'm like dumbfounded that we even think that we have to talk about this, because this is taxpayer dollars that's going to someone else that no one even appropriated or nobody on city council even approved. That should end instantly. And that money should be directed right back to the clerk treasurer's office, that $35,000 or whatever they've collected so far, and that's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I'm sorry, I mean, I don't even know, I can't even believe that we're saying that we need to have a discussion about this.
So and this is, I'm not trying to be combative, what do we do with the tenants that are currently in space?
They can stay there and they can lease from the city, not the DWA. It's really pretty simple. I mean, they just send the checks to the city.
Okay. Well, we'd have to cancel their agreement. They would have to cancel their lease agreements with DWA, and then we would have to obviously.
That would be easy done, but all these things, we need to leave a clearer paper trail than we are leaving now. That's not a very clear paper trail.
And that, we all acknowledge that that agreement of the time is not what we should have today.
I mean,
And so that's what we're working toward
in a
fixing.
formal business, this wouldn't be allowed.
Oh,
Really?
really? No.
If I understand correctly, again, you started the conversation with, we met with Marla and Counselor Spaljaric.
Mhm.
And the outcome of that meeting was that there's documentation that says, hey, here's how we're going to move forward. Is my understanding correct on that or no?
Yeah, there's a proposed agreement that's been drafted for your out.
So in short, is the proposed agreement that we continue doing things as we are, except the money goes to the city as opposed to the DWA?
I don't think so, because I don't believe we can just convert the lease. So legally, I think we would have to go through an RFP process for us to then release the building to the current tenants. I don't know that factually, but that is my understanding of the law, just like when we had to send out the RFP for the cafe. So you gotta go through that whole RFP process.
It sure make it a lot clearer, though. I mean, and clarity,
I think the clarity will come in the form of the new agreement. If council doesn't want to move that agreement forward, then we'll have to talk about the next steps legally to remove the tenants, as I understand it.
We don't have to remove
So
the
no,
tenants.
we don't want to do that. So I'm sorry, Troy. The most expedient way to do this perhaps is simply an ordinance, I guess, that any funds collected from the DWA through leasing of city property, 100% is remitted back to the city. Is that the fastest way to make that happen?
Sounds like, yeah.
I think Marla too might be able to clear up some of this with the research.
Well, I just want to know what, I mean,
You wanna,
So
No.
in that case, and I don't disagree that that could happen, DWA would have to agree with it to lease the property from us for whatever you guys deem appropriate, so we can lease to a nonprofit for $1 in perpetuity, that they go out and then don't have the legal ramifications and processes to be able to lease the buildings. So if we are holding the lease, we've got to send out an RFP. 1205 may win, they may not.
Yeah, that's, I don't want to complicate life for the people that are there. You know, I don't want to complicate life for 1205. But at the same time, the fact that the DWA are getting the funds is bizarre to me. So, okay, I will connect with Councilor Spaljaric and Marla and Ann and figure out what we can do to move this forward. Because again, to Troy's point,
We're certainly open to that
it shouldn't be
conversation.
a long,
How-
drawn-out
however-
process.
Yeah, however it goes. I can only imagine that DWA was not gonna manage those properties for free. So there at least needs to be some sort of way to compensate them, I would
Sure.
think. I mean, it does take some energy, and we don't have the manpower from a staff perspective for the city. Not that we couldn't change that, but I think we would be heavily upside down if we chose to do that.
how many properties are there?
As of now, there's the two that we described, which are both owned by the town of Westfield. There was a whole email chain about plans for this property here. I haven't heard an outcome of what needs to happen there. I was planning on doing some renovations, turning it into a functional workspace for the Grand Junction Coordinator as well as the Westfield Welcome Team. That seemed to be met with some significant resistance, so I'm looking at direction on what you all want to do with that. In an ideal world, if it's going to be leased, it is part of this overall agreement. And then when we start talking about the RFP here in a minute, we'll talk about the cafe building as well.
yeah. Can I just make a quick statement here, Jeremy? You know, we talk about the RFP process as being this long drawn out, it's an encumbering process, you know, on everybody. It's not. I mean, this is not a jab at you, but we've done it by hiding things in the Noblesville Times in a small square of a RFP. I mean, and it moves on, you know? I mean, we've done it as a city. It's happened in the past, before your time, ultimately. But, I mean, it's like we're trying to figure out ways how we can continue to do things the wrong way instead of doing it the right way the first time. And it's, you know, just processes and procedures anyhow. Marla, you have something, you have anything you want to add to this or no?
I wanted you to know, Steve Latour has been really wonderful to work with. I mean, very
Yeah.
forthcoming in what their agreements are. The difficulty is the DWA has an agreement that goes back to 2010 that says what their function will be for the city. The current agreement that they're working on is solely, my understanding of it, is just property management. And I can't think of a property management company that would take 100% of revenues from someone,
Right.
which is what they're doing. But I think they are amenable to working with it, working with the city. Manny had said in our meeting that day that most municipalities have some kind of organization that does kind of function the way the DWA does. My problem that I've had personally, which is why I haven't really responded, is we're taking care of one thing, the property management side, but we're not taking care of the thing we have been continually dinged for 3 years in the SBOA reports, which is that original agreement, the 2010 agreement that was predicated on what their functionality is as a not-for-profit and a separate division of the chamber. I don't know if the chamber could do it. That legal stuff is over my head. What I do know is they are getting 100% of the revenues from the leasing, and we still have to come up with some kind of agreement on how we're going to recoup the drainage assessments. And they did pay the taxes, but they paid the taxes really, really late, which is also a problem that we've had at ProX. And the one thing we should never be as a government agency is late on our taxes.
Right.
So I do have a policy proposal, but I kind of wanted to hear feedback. It's like we're perpetually waiting for feedback from one another.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's irritating.
Right, I agree it's irritating, so, I mean, I have one that I gave to Mike as far as policy on how to at least just send them a bill for their drainage assessments, but since they also have to pay their taxes, instead of collecting $1 a month at 8% interest, maybe we should just kind of prorate what the taxes are gonna be for the year so we have the money and we can pay the taxes.
They're
because
paying
they're-
property taxes, these city properties?
Well, 1205 is paying, there are property taxes that need to be paid on 1205, and there are property taxes that should be paid on Paris Insurance Group, but evidently, the county wasn't informed that there was a commercial business operating in there, so they still thought it was just a municipal asset, and therefore was tax exempt, which the county admits it's also a problem on their end to come out and assess the buildings. If you don't notify them what's there, then they just think it's yours. So I've had that ongoing discussion with Kevin Poor, but I don't have any kind of authority to tell the county to tax the building. It has to, they're unclear about whether it comes from Cindy or admin or DWA or how we're gonna do this. So there's just a myriad of problems, and I'm not trying to muck anything more of it up, but just come to some finite conclusion, how we get the money that technically belongs to the taxpayers and the city.
Well, I think, and I will tell you this, I think it should be retroactive. I mean, if you can hire a realty company at 10% management, then for heaven's sake, why would the DWA keep 90% or more than 90% of it?
I don't
I
know
mean-
what it would cost, but Manny was pretty clear and seemed frustrated by, if not the DWA, then an RFP process, which he said in the meeting we were in. But again, that's more for council to decide how they want it handled. And I guess what Cindy and I have been talking about is, well, how would you like us to collect the money? We want to collect the money, but we need you to tell us what you want to do about it, so,
Everything's hard till it becomes easy.
right. Well, thank you.
Boom, boom, boom.
And the only thing I would add to that is in order to collect the money, we have to have a different agreement in place so that there is a share of those revenues, which is the goal of the new agreement. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? So by maybe next Monday, we'll have it complete and done and figured out what we're doing by the council meeting?
Yeah, as soon as we have comments to review, I think the agreement's ready to be considered.
By next Monday, then. I think we should have that done and over. Man, it's freaking, that blows my mind. Okay,
So do we just want to, and I don't want to take over your meeting, do we want to
no, have at
skip
it.
to the RFP update for Grand Junction Plaza?
Yeah,
Okay, and then we'll get that done, and then we can focus on the more important stuff. So as you know, we sent out an RFP for this. We had a few potential bidders. We ended up pulling it back so that I could bring it back to you all to get approval. I did that, sent it back out, and noticed it. Those same bidders still showed interest. There was, as a part of the RFP, an on-site mandatory pre-bid meeting. So come toward the space, ask questions, do all that. If you are going to be a proposal, we do an intent to bid on almost every RFP that we do. No one showed up for that. So no one then qualified for to be a proposal, a proposer, and then subsequently the RFP just, it times out, dissolves. So we have two options. We do now have people that have come and showed interest. So we have two options. One, we go through the appraisal process again, send out an RFP again, and get some proposals. Or option two, if we're gonna move forward with a DWA agreement, and Steve is very clear that at least on this building, and however you guys wanna handle the others is fine, but this building, we need money flowing back for maintenance of the facility, maintenance of the park, et cetera, which is why we were gonna try to do it ourselves. So as you guys talk about this overarching agreement, if you could include the conversation on these two houses or properties, this house here on the corner, and which is right now, it's got some physical issues. We did put a new roof on it because it was leaking in about 5 different places. And there's certainly value to it, whether it's as a city office or as something else in the future, another business or whatever, to decide, do we want to renovate it? Do we want to lease it? Do we want to sell it? Do we want to partner with DWA and have them manage both of these for us? Or do we want, and specific to Grand Junction, do we want to go through the RFP process again to see if we can get any other interest?
you're talking about for the house.
I'm
also.
talking both.
Both.
Yeah, both. So we really have, we've got, the goal here is we have a 3-car garage space basically that is being used for storage to support events that are at Grand Junction. Most of our events are getting moved that direction. So Westfield Welcome we were gonna renovate the space. Westfield Welcome would have functional, permanent office space here, closer to where their events are. And then the Grand Junction coordinator that's down there all day, every day, would have a space as well. If you all are comfortable with that, and it sounds like at least Cindy is not, then we can march forward with that in the 23 budget. If not, then we need to decide, do we want to sell it, which is another RFP process and appraisals and all those things. Do we want to go through an RFP process and lease it, like we were trying with the cafe? Or do we want to include it in the overarching agreement with DWA as a property management piece? So, and I'm indifferent. I personally think it is best used at least for the next 3 to 5 years as as an office space for the city for us to function out of, and that's for a couple reasons. With my proposal, we would have a total investment in that property of $350,000. It would be completely renovated and functional with the idea that it could become a restaurant or something else in the future. My problem with doing that today is we already have parking issues down there. We have at least 2 more restaurants coming on in the Park Street area. That'll all be done before the garage is done. So
For $350,000, you could tear it down and build something new.
it appraised value of things down there. So we paid $100,000
I'm not talking
for
about
it.
appraised value. I'm talking about true value. You could tear that thing down and build something else for $350,000. Sure of it.
If that's what you all would like to do,
No,
that's
I'm
fine
not
too.
saying it. I'm just questioning the $350,000.
The $350 was the $100,000 that we bought it for, and then $250,000 worth of renovations. So it's got mold in the attic and the crawl space, so it's not habitable today from an office perspective. I can't put people in there. We are using it as storage in the back half. We do also have dumpsters and things there in the backyard area, and it's used for parking for staff when Grand Junction's having events, but that's the extent of it, so.
I'm not sure what I think. Scott?
When you say RFP for, all you're determining is rental value,
It depends if we're leasing or selling.
either one.
And actually, the appraisals determine what the minimum lease price or sale price could be.
Okay, so you divide it by so many years and that's it, or so much a month, basically.
So it goes by a year, and I believe when the appraisals came back for the cafe, it was in the neighborhood of $21 or $22 a square foot for an annual rental.
So that we're not giving somebody a sweetheart deal, basically, so the reason for that.
Yes, it's so that it's a state statute that prevents government from leasing to friends and or their spouse and collecting money.
Was there any activity on this restaurant business, in the park?
No.
Or in-
No response.
None?
Zero.
But he's since had multiple folks reach out to him and said they're.
There's a couple that are
interested
interested. There were a couple that were interested before. Whether or not they can financially make it work, I don't know.
So they gotta make it work to our average of 2 appraisals, then, basically.
If
Or
we are the
whatever.
lessor, that's the minimum,
Yeah.
yes. Unless we partner with a management company that is a non-for-profit that can go out and lease at a rate that is equitable for the space and how it can be profitable. Because they're not bound by the same RFP and state statute requirements.
Just asking.
How soon-
No, they're all great questions.
How soon do you need direction on that, or input on that?
Right now, we're using the cafe as kind of a welcome center, so it's open during business hours. Restrooms are in there, people can come in and look around. That's where John, the Grand Junction coordinator, is officed. It's obviously not ideal long-term. It needs to be a fixed draw to the park so that we have a coffee shop or something like that down there, so people are not just coming down for the playground and events, that they're coming down to eat lunch or to do whatever. Development to the north of that is obviously going to help that, but that's 3 or 4 years down the road. By the time they get the retail component of Union Square up and done, it can stay as it is if that's the desire. We had an idea of doing like a pop-up kitchen type thing, so a food truck would come, prepare their food out in the parking spots and serve out of the building. We haven't really ran that down of how we do that. I don't know that we could, it would have to be a free space for them to do that, because I don't think we would, if not, we gotta go through the same stuff to
Yeah.
get a lease rate.
Hey, Jeremy, just a question, in all seriousness. So when on something like this, I heard you say earlier that the RFP dictates the lease amount.
The
or-
appraisal.
Or the appraisal, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry. The appraisal dictates the lease amount. So what was your minimum?
From recollection, just memory, I think it was in the neighborhood of $21 a square foot
Okay.
on an annual basis.
And how many square foot there?
Depends if they utilize the basement or not. The upper level is in the neighborhood of 1,200 square feet. The other tricky part is it needs to function as the ice skating rink rental facility as well as it was designed. So it's got lockers and it's got an elevator for it and all these other things to support the ice skating function. So whoever
So
we
it probably
partner
wouldn't be
with.
the whole amount. You wouldn't really lease the 1,200 square feet. You'd
Correct.
lease like 600 or
Well,
something.
potentially. Now, so that's a 2-month-a-year operation. If they wanted to utilize that space, which is a large portion of it, during the rest of the year, then that would be acceptable and leasable. We would obviously have to work in there in that
Yeah.
agreement how either they operate and share in proceeds of the skate rental, which could work well. Otherwise, we have to hire staff to manage that, like seasonal staff, which we will anyway for the outside operation. Or very complicated. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way.
Right.
And that's some of those things that scared your small local mom and pop shop type folks from responding to the RFP.
Okay. Okay.
And Scott, to go back to your question of when do we need to know, the sooner the better. Specifically on the house, the sooner the better, because if we're gonna keep it and turn it into something functional, I need to have that in the budget for '23.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Finally.
Thank you.
John Rogers with the City of Westfield. I have given all three of you a spreadsheet that basically puts a timeline answering one of your questions that I saw here. What you see in front of you is, this is pretty fluid. As a matter of fact, I just got some updates from the county yesterday. And so, as it's been put to me in the past, as soon as I print this, it's out of date. But this it serves a couple of purposes. It gives you a sense of what we have as far as what we're servicing those dollars with. And then you also have another document that shows you the project list, the current project list. Not all the projects, just some of the bigger ones that we have in front of us right now at the City of Westfield. And I'm hoping that answers has a framework for the other part of your question. So as far as servicing debt, the spreadsheet shows how we were stepping some of the debt service from the current general fund process to the EDAs. And then the cash balances that you see in those EDAs, sorry, excuse me, at the end of '23 is those dollars are basically allow us to be nimble when there's a developer agreement that comes in front of you, us, the RDC, and we want to bond something like that. This could be part of that process. Additionally, though, it also puts us in a place where if we have a major change in our tax rate or a major change in the economy, we can cover debt service and still maintain the types of activities we have in those economic development areas. The intent of the project list that I've put in front of you was really a sense of magnitude. I just wanted, at least at this level of the organization, I wanted you to have a sense of magnitude of what's ahead of us right now. These are the things we can clearly see that are in the near future that, in fact, I put this list together. Several of those items at the top of the list were after talking with the counselors on an individual basis. So we basically prioritized after every counselor gave us their top 5. I basically went through and scored them and put together this list. So really the top 5 areas of this list are council priorities, maybe be a little strong, but this is what I came away with from those meetings. And then the additional projects that are on the list are projects that we have currently in front of us, and we will be working through as part of the '23 budget process, but also as part of the overall sustainability strategy.
Now, John, just to clarify
Yes,
this,
sir.
in my mind, the numbers you have on this list are kind of a wish list, basically, to a certain extent anyhow. And what we would be doing is paying for these over time.
Correct.
And as the council or the RDC, well, it's just the council in this list, would choose to do certain things. I mean, some of them are pretty right on the cusp. We're gonna have to do it. Some of them are already spoken for. And that has to be covered by the funds from this,
Well,
this is RDC money here.
This is, yes, you're looking, that's a great observation, Joe. This is what you have in front of you, that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That is one portion of the organization. The other part, which is, and again, this is a fluid conversation. It's part of the '23 budget process, the next budget process, the next budget process. We also have dollars that we have in the general fund that should be more than the expenses that we have in the general fund. So that would allow you to leverage any of that, if you so choose, to bond these projects, right? Just like we've done in the past. So, again, I don't want to be repetitive, but the whole idea here is that I just wanted to take this opportunity to paint the bigger picture of what's out there right now. And and Joe's correct, there's a lot of discussion here. This is, I don't know that I would define it as a wish list, Joe, but these are the projects that are in front of us right now.
Yeah, they will come in some order of preference.
Yeah, and these are the types of conversations as the financial leaders of the organization, and and we will come to you with recommendations after we get through this budgeting process.
But it would be easy to overpromise.
Well, we
you-
never want to do that, and that's the reason,
You have to be careful about that, because if we'd have another 2008 or worse,
Thank you.
which we could have,
And so you need those, you're spot on. And-
we'd be in a
and
tough spot.
and we don't want to be in a tough spot that we're in a position that we can't cover the day-to-day activity.
Because I don't think we've seen the end of
Who knows?
miscalculation of our federal government.
Yeah, who knows?
We
Who
don't
knows?
know, but I don't think so.
So I appreciate you putting this together for us. I'm going to ask this, and I don't mean to be, I'm just looking for some information here, I guess. On the summary for the projects that are in front of us currently,
Correct.
do you have 2 or 3 that almost made the list but didn't quite?
Not really. I think that.
So
I think
everything is looked at and
I
on
won't,
this list?
Well,
in all frankness,
John, if I can jump in there.
Sure.
Yes, there are infrastructure projects, whether they're being funded another way or not. There are other needs that are out there as well. These are really the unfunded ones, or the projects that aren't eligible for federal funding, should we be able to apply to the MPO and get money.
No, I appreciate that clarification, yeah. And so other ones that are not, that don't currently have a funding mechanism, that are, as you put it, in front of us right now, are there others out there that almost made the list but didn't quite?
So it would be a good time to, and John can come up and talk more about it, but as we continue to develop and traffic changes, there will always be, from a road perspective, there will always be more projects, roundabouts, ATL, added travel lane projects, things like that. But John, if there's. The short answer is it's never going to stop. The need's not ever going to stop. We have caught up really well, and especially with what's going on under construction right now. There are certainly other locations that roundabouts need to happen, specifically 181st and Wheeler Road. That one has not intentionally not been constructed because we don't have the alternate north-south road, which will be Grand Park Boulevard or Oak Ridge Road extension. So we don't have, in order to build it, we would have to close it, and then there's no route to school, there's no route from Grand Park to 32 to the restaurant area, things like that. So that's intentionally been held off, but it is a massive need. And John, are there other projects that I'm forgetting about?
I'm sure as we grow, there will be more projects, but these are the ones that we've identified as the highest priorities. And to add to that, they're also the ones that are on the long-range transportation plan, which is a plan that we maintain with the MPO to maintain competitiveness for federal funding. So these are projects that are on the long-range transportation plan as well.
Thanks, Joe.
And obviously that excludes the police station, fire station. Those things are not eligible.
I mean, there could potentially be 3 fire stations, right?
Yeah, we're trying to focus on 84 right now, but yeah, there will be a need for 85 and 86 as we continue to move forward.
Yeah. You know, go ahead. Okay. So I just want to turn the tables here to a philosophical, discussion of costs, return on investment to the taxpayer, et cetera. So, just even at the top, we're talking about the 191st Street, which, we have, $66 million basically as a result of what? I mean, what's created the need to spend our 66, or actually, let's say we're at $70 million on 191st Street, the extension?
It's a compounding problem. So as approved residential actually develops, there's a far greater use of 191st Street. Grand Park, clearly during peak times, backs up the intersection at Grand Park Boulevard and 191st Street. And then overarching, and we've heard it for a number of years, safety concerns with the road being as narrow as it is, and with the limited capacity that it can hold, and even so much as lighting needs out there, because it's really dark at night if Grand Park's not lit up.
Yeah. So, I mean, my thought on this is somewhat of a rhetorical question, because, philosophically, I look at this and I say, as we just got the appraisals back on Grand Park, for instance, and I say, hey, man, it's fantastic that we were about $120 million over what we thought it was worth, right? And the return on investment to the taxpayer of virtually nothing over the last 12 years of a park that's created nothing but expenses and costs, that the taxpayers really never received a dime, other than the fact that we get more infrastructure projects that we have to pay for that. And I think about that, and I just say, what is that return on investment to the taxpayer? And the taxpayer has actually been kicked in the pants and thrown out to dry, because those are, whether the appraisals are, if the appraisals are real and that is the real value, we've all been screwed. Because all we have here is infrastructure projects needed for the growth, yet there's no return on investment. There's no return on investment. There's no reduction in the tax rate to the individual, to the corporations. The schools didn't benefit because we installed an RDC that circumvents everyone on the city council. I mean, philosophically, I look at this and I say, hey, yeah, I get it. I mean, this is a great wish list, but it's absolutely insanity that we think that the government is an efficient allocator of capital when it comes to these projects or anything else. I mean, Joe, how much have we spent on Grand Park? 90-some million, 97 million, plus maybe another 6 million owed, plus interest on the COIP. I mean, let's say we're up to 120 million. So we're gonna sell a park possibly for $80 million that we've put $120 million into. Plus we're also gonna incur about $66 million to $100 million in infrastructure around Grant Park. That's a heck of a deal for you taxpayers, me included. Well, let's say it's 10 billion. What's the return to taxpayer? No, I'm just saying. What did we all get? Joe, assume I'm a moron. What did I get as a taxpayer? What did I get? What did I get? What, like what? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, folks, good, you know, that's what you got, you know. Unbelievable, man. So, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. So, I'm not arguing it's not what it is. I'm just saying, terrible business decisions by terrible business people. That's what gets us to the point we're at today. I mean, and the taxpayers will continue to be left holding the bag with no return on investment except maybe a Monon trail that they can ride their bike on, you know, or walk on. So I'm not saying some of these aren't needed. I'm just saying it because of it's where we're at. But man, whatever. I'm done with my rant. So you could have kicked me under the table at any time. So, yeah. All right.
Do you have any questions for John or I on that cash flow analysis?
I'll have to, I'm gonna look at it.
Okay. Well, the questions come up lots of times of what are we doing with the cash? The answer is it depends on what you all want to do with it. And we're also forecasting for what our debt coverage from a cash perspective so that when we have a downturn in the economy and appraised values or assessed values, start to decline, that we don't have to dip into cash operations to pay debt, which is why this RDC money in cash has been reserved, because the demand on fire service, police service, public works doesn't go down just because property values go down.
Right.
So we're trying to secure our operating fund, which is why we have the debt coverage forecasted out to 30, and it'll continue to get forecasted as we go. And as John mentioned earlier, and I think I did too, this gets updated all the time. And next time we talk, it'll be a little different, and we'll continue to monitor it as a part of that sustainability.
Okay.
So let me wrap my arm around that statement. If we have a shortage, there would be RDC money available. I'm not sure that's correct, is it? We would have to borrow it and pay it back. And I think we have to pay it back by what we borrow by the end of the year. I don't think we can dip into that.
I'm talking long-term. If there is a downturn, that's the purpose of us reserving cash, so that we don't have to take steps in the event that the EDAs don't generate enough to cover debt.
Outside of the RDA.
Exactly, outside of the RDC.
Okay.
So this RDC money is the city's money. The city's obligated to pay it back. If we don't have the cash flow in the TIF districts to pay the debt service, it's got to come from somewhere, which then comes from general fund, lit, and others to pay those, which is our operating budget.
Okay. I appreciate you putting this together, actually.
Not a problem. And again, it's pretty fluid. I can get you the updates, but really, if the RDC, we're pretty much doing this review in depth as we go through the 2023 budget. So that's when a lot of this will really get fine-tuned at the RDC 2023 budget conversations conclude.
The thing that's a little hard to analyze with Grand Park operating is you do not have a deduction for depreciation.
Nor interest.
nor interest, that's EBITDA, I guess. But if you had a deduction for depreciation, I think an operating statement would look a lot different, because you've got some expensive assets out there that, and the only time that shows up is when you have to pay for them and borrow the money in a not-for-profit situation. Regular business, it's on a depreciation schedule, and it's an expense. So we really haven't seen a full-blown for-profit business analyzation of that. And I would guess that some of these companies that are looking to operate it, I can't see anybody buying it, but that's just my backyard. I don't know. But they're going to know what the operations are going to require, or what we're going to require of them, probably. And those are sometimes pretty tough shoes to step into. I don't know. I don't have any experience in that kind of business, but you have to be careful that you don't get underwater and you don't even realize it.
Yep, we understand. Thank you for that comment. I'll remind everybody the proposal deadline is the 8th, so we will know if there's anyone interested in acquiring, operating, or partnering in Grand Park here in about a week.
Yep. When is that committee going to meet, Jeremy?
We are going to meet right at around that 8th timeframe, so as the proposals come in, they come into Taft, we will sit down in a orientation type setting to explain how you can access them, because we can't print them off and hand them to everybody. But yeah, that meeting's coming up 8th or 9th, first week of, or second week of August, I guess.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Site search. Is somebody here from site search? Okay.
Thank you, William, and your guest for hanging in there with us.
Yeah.
There we go.
Not quite.
Good afternoon.
It's almost the evening, William.
We're getting there. William Knox, Legacy Sports Group. I am here with Elizabeth Weimer, who, she'll probably be joining us here in a second, and Amy Eicher with Site Search, and we're going to go through a presentation, knowing that you guys had a busy agenda today. We'll try to get through this as quickly as we can. We've got a few slides we want to share with you. So you can learn a little bit about the company and their scope and what they do for us, and then kind of what actually happens at Grand Park. So we had Elizabeth scheduled to go first. Okay, we're going to try to get her on the line. But she is out of the country right now on a client visit, so I was already going to put the disclaimer out that if her internet connection got bad, we would step in and help out, but I really want you to hear from her directly if possible. But we'll, in the interest of time, I guess we'll keep going and see if she can join in. I know the timing around this was kind of difficult, given that we kind of had to get together pretty quickly, but we wanted to get in front of you. Okay, perfect. Elizabeth, are you there?
Hi there.
Perfect.
Hi, all.
Awesome.
This is Elizabeth. I'm here.
Perfect timing. Well, I just did the brief introduction, and I'm going to pass it over to you. I'll drive. I don't know if you can see the screen, but I'll drive the slides for you as you go through.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you all very much for inviting me to present today. My name is Elizabeth Weimer. I'm the founder and president of Site Search. So how we started the business, I was working for hotels. I worked at hotels for 15 years. I worked at Opryland, Hilton, and Hyatt. And that whole time I was raising 3 very active boys. So their club directors and managers came to me and asked me if I would coordinate their housing and their travel. Sure, that's my volunteer work. Well, we started doing their housing and their tournaments, and then other clubs came to me, clubs in Cincinnati and Indianapolis, and said, hey, will you do it for us too? And that's how a company was born. So we are on our 21st year. So started out just me, but of course we've grown since then. So this is a quick snapshot of our team. Not all of these people are in the Westfield area, but most of them are. Because my background was in sales, it was very important to me that our staff would have a background in hotels also, sales hotels. So probably about 90% of our staff come from a hotel background. The learning curve is just much easier for them. They understand how hotels work. I also feel I'm very strong about customer service. And I just feel that if you've worked at a hotel, if you stood behind a front desk and you've been yelled at and you can handle that, then you can really handle anything. So I'm a strong believer that when they're talking to our guests that are coming to Westfield, that they can provide that strong customer service. So our office locations, obviously our largest office location is in Westfield, but we also try to have locations where we have other business. That way, if we need to meet on site or there's site visits or they want to meet in person, just that we are close to where the action is. So we have an office up in Blaine, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. We have an office in Louisville, one in Cincinnati, and then of course Westfield, and then one in South Florida. Professional affiliations. We are a member of the Travel Leaders Network. That's an invitation-only network for top travel producers. And what that gives us is discounted buying power for lowest rates possible. And I know everybody thinks about site search as just doing hotels, but we are actually full service. So if we have teams coming to Westfield from California and they need air and they need transportation, we can do the whole thing for them. And that discount really helps us. We also we belong to Compete Sports Diversity, Sports ETA, the Alliance of Independent Meeting Professionals, and then ASTA, the American Society of Travel Advisors. And then some of our clients. So when my clients from when I worked at hotels found out that I was just doing events and travel and that sort of thing, they came to me and said, would you do this for us? So we have a diverse portfolio of clients. We have corporate, we have association, and then of course we have sports. For instance, last week I took 100 KFC owners on the Bourbon Trail. So we do a lot of different things. USA
That would be
Pickleball is
awesome.
one of the fastest USA Pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in the nation. We handle the US Open Pickleball down in Naples, Florida. They have 10,000 attendees for that event. So it's really growing. Another nice thing about our clients is we meet them and we develop relationships with them in Westfield, and then they take us with them when they start having events in other areas. So Bullpen, SPD, Lax USA, we were all just worked with them first in Westfield, but now they've hired us for all their events. Facilities we serve. So we are the sole housing provider for Finch Creek, Graham Park, Creekside Baseball, which is in Kansas City, National Sports Center, which is the one that's up in Blaine, the suburb of Minneapolis, Pacers Athletic Center, and then Championship Park in Kokomo. And then we're also the sole provider for destinations. So if you are going to have a meeting in South Bend, Evansville, Kalamazoo, or even for Rockford now, we're working with Rockford, we would be the ones handling your events. So we are the sole providers for those cities. Any facility that they would go and use in those towns, we would handle. So I love this heat sheet. It just kind of tells you where we are, which is a little bit of everywhere. You can see, obviously, most of our business is right in the Midwest. You know, Indiana is bright red, Ohio, bright red. But we go all the way up into Wisconsin. We go down into southern Indiana and Kentucky. But we also have a lot of business out on the East Coast, from New Hampshire all the way down to South Carolina, South Florida, Texas, even Southern California. We also have some events that are out of the country. Right now, that's where I am for an event. But we have had travel to Spain with Adidas basketball, took them over there. We had a basketball tournament down in Puerto Rico. So we don't just need to be in the US, we can go anywhere.
Elizabeth, can I ask you just a quick
Yeah,
question?
go right ahead.
Yeah, are you the sole owner of the business?
I am. It's
Okay.
just me.
Okay, that's awesome. Congratulations. It's pretty,
Not even my
pretty cool.
husband, though he might pretend to be.
Yeah.
No one has any interest in me.
Okay, okay.
Perfect. Well, we're going to bring Amy up, and she's going to talk a little bit about what happens day to day on site at Grand Park.
Yeah. we'll have her focus in on just the Grand Park aspect.
Okay.
Well, my name is Amy Eicher. I have been a part of Site Search since 2014. So I was brought on specifically for Grand Park and to be moved up from Louisville to specifically be in the Westfield area. I came from a hotel background, which has definitely helped me foster the relationships with, thank you, the hotels in the area. From 2014 when the park opened until about, I guess, 2021 technically, I was doing all the events at the park, and it's grown so much that we have brought on a secondary manager. So I'm the director for the Indy area, and then I focus solely on the diamond sports side. So that would include Championship Park and Grand Park. And then Kelly Landis has recently started with us to focus in on the event center and field sports side of things. She does come to us from an area hotel. So she's very in tune with Grand Park. We worked with her as a hotelier, and we're excited to have her on our side at this time to help us with Grand Park. The process for the events is, first step, getting with the tournament director, trying to understand what the event needs are. From there, we're contracting with the hotels, going through all of the registration and tracking for the teams. Once the event is over, we're sending out the final reports to get those final pickup numbers so we can send the report to the city and get you guys your check for the rebate portion.
So I'll talk a little bit about the stated play policy. I know this has come up in previous meetings, and we've had a lot of discussions around it. Traditionally in this space, which some of you have traveled for your kids, you're required to stay in certain hotels related to that event. Grand Park is one of the first campuses to go about working with our organizers such that each event that comes to our campus is required to be a stated play event. So early on in the existence of stated play, it was driven by the event operators. We now have shifted that, and it's kind of more our jurisdiction to determine which events we want at the campus, and those that we select more so than not are stated play. And what that means is that the participants in that event are required to stay within the hotels that have been selected by that event organizers, which are managed by Site Search. Over the years that it has grown to kind of transition a little bit, it's anywhere between 6 and 10 rooms are required by each team in order to get them to comply with the stated play policy. For Bullpen, they've really monitored this for us, and a lot of our other event organizers has as well, whereas if those teams does not hit that mark, they message them and they are subject to be removed from the event if they don't comply. So while most teams might have 20 rooms associated with it, when you incorporate their family and friends, they have to have at least the minimum number that's required for their sport to comply with the stated play policy.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yep.
So in the baseball contract, I know it says that there's a $250 fee if you opt out.
Yes.
Who gets the $250?
So we get that, but we and Elizabeth can speak to this a little bit, we very rarely let that happen anymore. A lot of times, historically, people would want to stay with friends or family, or they were camping or something of that nature, or they wanted to use their points. We found, and Elizabeth, you can definitely chime in, we found that the value to us is de minimis in comparison to what we would get from them when they were going through our blocks.
Why would not the city not get that?
When I say we, I mean the city.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
Because well, you're
Grand
not part of
Park
the
gets
city,
that.
right, anymore, technically.
Sometimes I forget.
Okay,
Old habit.
okay.
But yeah, I don't think that 250 is enough, and I really think that they're trying to go. I think once you open that can of worms, it's tough. I think they need to stay. Now, if they have a super great excuse, then we had one where one of the teammates or people on the team, he owned a hotel and he could give, and so things like that, maybe we'll give a waiver. But I really don't. Even if they say we can't afford it, we're we need a $79 rate, then we'll go ahead and find you a $79 rate if that's what you need.
Yeah.
We'll work with, I'd rather work with someone than to have them do a waiver and go out on their own.
Yeah, so Elizabeth, a lot of times, like when we, here in Westfield, if you go out, you can look on VRBO, and you have people that have bought these houses and they've turned them into basically sleeping 26. How are you,
Right.
and so for instance, and I know of 2 of them that are here in the city, and I'm like, are they collecting anything? They said, no, they're not, they're outside of the program.
Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
well,
And
how
it
are
is
we
gonna
collecting
take
that money?
So I just want to
Amy's
address a
going to
couple.
speak to that in just a minute because we do have a program for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in regards to the buyout question, that 250, I do want to make sure you understand, we don't advertise that. It's
Yeah.
not like it's up on the website or anything. Like with the state of play policy, the state of play simply states you have to book through site search. And if I get an email asking about the buyout, I honestly tell them we don't have it.
Yeah.
I just tell them we don't have one. And then if they have a good reason, they're going to come back and kind of explain their situation. So then with that, I might, if it's a good reason, I might go to the tournament director, Matt, William, but it's not advertised. The first step is telling them it's not available.
Yeah.
So I just to make sure that's understood. And then Elizabeth might be able to say exactly when the partnership started, but several years ago, that's when the VRBOs and Airbnb were really coming on strong. So we actually have a partnership with Rent Like a Champion. So they are based out of Chicago. They started basically with Notre Dame football games. They specialize in home rentals. So we have an agreement with them so that the city is still getting their portion, but it is still being booked through us with the state of play policy. But they're still getting the home rental option if that's what the team would
Okay.
desire. So
Okay.
we do have
Thank
that
you.
in place.
So we offer that for every event, the home rental option. And there's a lot of legalities and tax stuff that are very different in home rentals than there is for hotels, right? So we have to be very careful with the hotel aspect. So Rent Like a Champion is able to handle that all for us, plus the city still gets paid for it.
Okay, that's awesome. That's actually what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the rebate structure that we have set up with the hotels, it's a per room night structure. So essentially for easy math, we've got $15 up here for the rebate. If a guest stays in one room for 2 nights, for that guest, it's $30 that would be going back to the city. Elizabeth, did you want to speak on this one?
Sure. So we've divided up a little bit differently on the revenue that comes back to the city. So for Diamond Sports, Grand Park receives 100% of the Diamond generated hotel rebates. The average number of room nights booked annually on the Diamond side is 31,332. So that's a different contract that Grand Park has with Bullpen and the Diamond side. Then on field side, it really just depends because there's different contracts for different events and different event owners. On what portion would go to the rebate would go to the event owner and what portion goes to Grand Park. The room nights on that side is about 40,485. We also do have, so that's all your rebate, what we pay you. We also do have a revenue share. So at the end of the year, well, actually it's per quarter, we keep track of where we are with revenue share. And you all earn as the more room nights we book for Grand Park. So once you hit 20,000 to 39,000, you receive an additional $1.50 per room night. Once we go over 40,000, which was probably, I guess, the second year on, then you receive $2 per room night. So your revenue share for 2021 was over $150,000. So we pay that out once you start, and then at the very end, we pay it out the balance. So that's I call it the tip. So that's the revenue share that you get out of what, and it incents you all and it incents us to make sure that we have all the rooms we can.
Yeah, and as Elizabeth stated, Diamond side is really easy. We get 100% of the rebate. On the field sports side, now I typically, when we bring on new events, this is a negotiation tool. So I usually work with Matt to really determine, when we look at the schedule, is it a favorable time period for us to attract this event? Because 9 times out of 10, they want 100% of the rebate. In our contract, our standard agreement states that the park receives 100% of the rebate. So if they sign off on that, then that's where we are. If they do negotiate that point, we get with Matt to kind of understand, what is the value of this piece of business to us? How do we want to approach it? More often than not, there's a 50-50 split. Sometimes they get 10, sometimes we get 5. It just depends on kind of how we negotiate that out. So this will talk a little bit about Grand Park, some of the numbers, and these are just some big numbers going back all the way to 2014. So a total of 520,000, and this takes us through the end of the year last year. 520,000 room nights, about $4.5 million in revenue generated. And then some of these other slides will show. So these slides really kind of show, this one here in particular shows room nights. So at the bottom, you can see the total room nights, but the chunks are quarters by year. So you can see kind of how we develop the book of rooms for the year and how we've grown over years. You've heard me say, I just said it as recent as the last RDC meeting, 2021 was an anomaly. We had a lot of people traveling as a result of still being off of work and still being available to kind of go out with their families. 2022, we're starting to see things go back to their normal trends. But even with that, I believe Elizabeth and Amy shared with me, to date, we've already booked about 88,000 room nights in 2022. So if you look at kind of where we were in 2019, which is kind of our baseline year before COVID, we've already exceeded some of those numbers. So I think we'll be in a really good position this year. Not sure we'll hit 105, but we're well on our way to kind of going in that direction. And then this just shows from the rebate collected by the city. So this is solely rebate, not inclusive of, I believe this is not inclusive of the rev share, which obviously you can see how that's grown over the years as well.
William or Elizabeth, like when when people are booking rooms, after after maybe they do 4 room nights, there's is there one room comped or something, or there's something of, and I apologize, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but
And
yeah, I know there's something like that.
go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it all depends. Some teams, some events don't need any comps. Some teams, some events do. So it all depends. And that's what Amy finds out in the very beginning. Are you going to need comp rooms? Do you need rooms for staff? But those rooms don't necessarily go to the teams, because a lot of times, bullpen will need those for their officials, for their staff, for the college coaches coming in. So that it's not necessarily they're going to go back. We've also used VRBO or Rent Like a Champion homes for officials when we haven't been able to get comps and that sort of thing. So it's not an automatic. Usually the ratio could be anywhere from 1 per 25 rooms to 1 to 50 rooms, depending on the hotel. But it's not an automatic that happens.
Okay, I just noticed in the agreement that it said something like 4 or 5 to 1 or something.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, so like, for bullpen, if we're putting up those umpires, do we get compensated then from bullpen for those hotel room nights? I mean,
So typically the hotels take those rooms out of their inventory for those. And when I started way back in the day, our comp policy was 1 for 15, and Elizabeth just said they've went up to almost 1 per 50. So 50 rooms booked, you get 1 comp. A lot of times what has happened with bullpen, because they are trying to draw more of their officials from the local area, they're not requiring as many rooms, but they still do require overnight rooms. So those are typically pulled from the hotel inventory prior to them giving us their blocks and are used for those purposes.
does bullpen pay the city or you guys, or do we get a portion of those?
Typically, we do not receive revenue from those. Those comp rooms are for, so again, the system typically works for a venue like ours where that is controlled by the event operator. We flip the script and we are controlling it as a venue. Because we're a venue and we're just selling that space, we don't typically have a need for those comp rooms. But if we had, say for instance, this was a USA soccer event and they had dignitary coming in, we would use those comp rooms for those purposes. Because we don't have a need for them, we just let bullpen use them. But we're not compensated for those, and that's never been the case in the past.
Okay.
We do not pay for those, no.
Oh, okay.
No, there's no cash value to a comp.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we don't use it, we lose it. So there's just kind of one of those things
I
where
got you.
there's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. to
No,
ask
no, that's a good question. And this just shows, Elizabeth kind of talked about this, but over the years, this just shows the booking, Diamond versus Field Sport. They're kind of even for the most part. You have your bumps, and depending on the year, but this just shows kind of how it breaks down by both sides of the park. And then I'm going to bring Amy back up because she's going to talk a little bit about the reporting, reconciliation, and how we know the hotels are giving us the right numbers based off of what the actual inventory was that was received for the event.
Yeah.
So any rebate checks that are sent out, they're based on actualized numbers. So an event, if say they booked 100 room nights, just for easy math. You have some cancellations, family can't come in till Saturday, cancel Friday, that kind of thing. So once we get actualized numbers, let's say it goes down to 87 room nights. The way we get to that number is through the reconciliation process. So this is a screenshot straight from our website. This is what the hoteliers see. So it essentially just lists out every single reservation that was booked through our system. They go in, make any changes. If it was canceled, dates changed, or if it's exactly as it's listed, they select that too. If they might have gotten a direct booking that they put in the block, since it was 2 days from the check-in date, they would add this. So those additional room nights are also captured. Once the hotel submits this, our office approves it, make sure everything, no entire team canceled or anything like that. And then we base our invoices to the hotel on these numbers.
Okay.
Once we get all the reconciliations back for an event and we've sent all of the invoices, we would then this is a final pickup report. So we would put this together. It's broken down by Hamilton County and then outside Hamilton County. This is what would then be sent on to the city and what the rebate check is based on. So you can see here at the bottom, this is the final rebate. This is a baseball event, so the full rebate would go to the city. There wouldn't be a split. This is the payment timeline. So the reconciliation process on the hotel side, it's give or take between 1 to 25 days. Our system automatically sends out the reconciliation link for them to complete the day after the final checkout. So some of them will do it on day one, some of them we have to bug and get them to submit it to us. But as soon as I get that reconciliation, I'm gonna go in and approve it for that event. So that's why the approval timeline, it's, we'll start at day one and go out about 35 days, and then we're sending the invoices in that timeline as well. And then at the 30-day mark is when we would then be able to send the final report and the rebate check onto you guys. And you can see the collection piece of that goes from 30 days out to 90 plus. And I'm going to let William speak to that a little bit.
And I'd like to add in, we tell the hotels they have 48 hours to fill out that reconciliation, but hotels are just so short-staffed right now, and our salespeople are cleaning rooms, and so reconciliation time is just so much longer now than it should be. But it's something that's so important to us that we can't skip that. We have to make sure that what we see on our side and what they see on their side matches.
Is there any way that this data can be used to help us bring in hotels to Westfield? I mean,
It has been historically, yes.
okay,
Yeah, so a lot of hotels, when they're coming into the market, and typically they'll go to Hamilton County Tourism to collect it, they'll want to know some of the, the rates in the area, the occupancy rates and all that, and they do gather that in advance of them kind of making a decision.
yeah, because obviously, I'd rather have them come to Westfield than Noblesville. So, if there's a way to use
Yes.
that data.
And Grand Park typically is the draw,
Yeah.
for some of those properties. There's a whole nother meeting we can talk about
Okay,
how that
okay,
whole process
sorry.
works. But no,
Okay.
so the unique thing about what Site Search provides to the park is typically what will happen at a normal third-party vendor, once they do the invoicing, that payout is after collection. So what happens with Site Search, once they invoice the hotels, they cut us a check. And then she goes out and does the collection and collects the money from the hotels on our behalf. Now, I think she can speak to this. She's been burned a few times where she's collected and paid us, and she's probably got some receivables still handing out there. And Elizabeth, if you want to speak to that a little bit, but that's one of the unique things for us early on, and I have the good fortune of being here since day one, while not the director, but involved. Cash flow was a huge thing for us in the early days. So we wanted to make sure that we were putting ourselves in the best position to get to where we could be right-sided. So as part of their agreement, they decided to pay us on reconciliation as opposed to once they collected. So Elizabeth, you can speak to that if you want.
Awesome.
Sure. So on the positive part of that, it's good for me because I don't have that money hanging over my head to give you. Like, I've given it to you, now it's just my problem to figure out. But we do, especially, hotels, no one ever pays you within 30, and you're lucky if you get paid within 90. But I have, and I don't know if we have a slide on this, I have receivables that are more than a year old. Now, if you go into, more than 90, probably 120, you're not in the Westfield area, the Grand Park area, I can start threatening lawsuits and do that sort of thing. My problem, and it's a great problem, I guess, my problem with the Westfield hotels, if I tell them I'm not ever gonna use them again, I'm not gonna have any hotels to use. I mean, it's because they all do it, right? So, we've sued 2 hotels in the Westfield area for money. I think they owed probably between the two, $30,000. And once I sue them, obviously, I'm never gonna use them again. So, we've written off a few. There's a few other hotels that we won't use, but you know, I can't eat all that money, right? Some is cost of doing business, but collections is really tough. And again, collections is tough now again because hotels are so short-staffed. Their cash flow is bad, but you know, I have 3 people in accounting. That's all they do is chase money all day long. Is try to get paid. So it's a tough situation, but it is what we do. I was looking at receivables, and I think I was talking to William about. I have receivables that are over a year old from Westfield, good Westfield hotels, that I call them and I say, you've got to get these paid. And
Yeah, and a lot of times, ironically, and it's hard to believe, some of these hotel properties struggle to pay their innkeeper's tax. So when you think about them struggling to pay that, and when I say struggling, I might say choose not to. This is definitely lower on the totem pole related to that. So
Yeah.
yeah, because they know that they have me. You
Yeah.
know, I'm going to keep using them if I have to, so until it gets really bad.
Yeah.
This is just a quick snapshot. I think this is from 2021 of the hotels, our top 5 hotels that we use. I just think it's interesting. Sheraton was number 1. The reason Sheraton is number 1, not in Hamilton County, it's the one at Keystone, is because it has so much rooms. And because they had nothing going on because of COVID, they were able to give us tons of rooms. Now, this year it hasn't been so great. She and I have had conversations. They've had other business. They can't give us that many rooms. The Spring Hill at Westfield is number 2. Wyndham, which used to be the Cambria that's on campus, number 3. Marriott, that's the Marriott North over near Keystone. And again, because they have so many rooms and they can give us so many rooms. And then that Best Western is the Best Western Fishers, and they just give us everything they got. I mean, and we can fill them. So that's, you know, a lot of hotels, their strategy is we give 50% to group, we keep 50% for transient. But hotels like Best Western said 100%, here you go, Grand Park, fill me. So that's why their numbers are so high.
Yeah, and that 9,000 rooms equates to 6% of the inventory for Sheridan in 2021. So that's a big number related to just Grand Park, that one facility booking 6% of their available inventory for the year. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
That's what we got, and we would be more than happy to answer any questions.
I asked them all as I went.
Good,
Sorry.
perfect. Well, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you doing this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right. Joe, Scott?
I'm good.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
All right, Jeremy, anything else? Okay, that's it. Meeting's adjourned.